Welcome to the video. Today we're going to be giving you a step-by-step on how to install the S-Tec switch system for a second generation Colorado or Canyon. The system we have here is the 8+2 configuration. This is the main panel which mounts inside the truck. We have a power and lockout, and then 8 individual switches which will control various functions depending on what you decide to wire them to. This one in particular also has a voltage readout and a on-off should you choose to hardwire an inverter to the 3-prong standard outlet over here. We also have the main control box. This has switches 1 through 6, the relays and fuses. This one has the fuses and relays for 7 and 8. We also have your hardware, and then this panel we have our 60 amp circuit breaker and the low voltage disconnect. This will actually turn off the system should you leave something on accidentally, so you do not run out of battery. Alright, now that we've done a little introduction and discussed what we're doing in the video, I wanted to go over a couple other things. First, definitely recommend familiarizing yourself with the process of the installation and the panels that need to be removed and what you're getting yourself into. Next, I wanted to go over a couple things that I recommend you have to make this a bit easier. First, set of trim tools. These come in exceptionally handy in getting various pieces of the interior of the truck off without damaging them. Set of wire crimps and strippers as needed to make extensions and connections. An assortment of electrical connectors, some heat shrink and a lighter, some electrical tape, and then whatever wrenches and sockets you need to disconnect your battery and connect the circuit breaker, etc. So just wanted to go over a couple things that I found made this job a lot easier. So with all that said, let's get started. Step 1, disconnect your battery. All right, so the first step we're going to do, we're under the hood. We're going to go ahead and mount our accessory panel with the low voltage disconnect and the 60 amp circuit breaker. We've gone ahead on the square hole on the battery box here. We've gone ahead and made a little slit for the bolt to fit through. There's an included washer to take up the backside. So for hardware, we have one self-tapper and a washer, lock nut, and a 1/4 inch bolt. I'll set this in. Take your 1/4 inch bolt, your washer, and your lock nut. Run through this hole here. Washer goes on the back side with the lock nut. We're going to leave it loose for the time being while we get the self-tapper in. Now that that's secured, we'll go ahead and tighten down the nut back here that holds this plate in place. Alright, we're going to take a 7/16 socket. Go ahead and tighten down the lock nut on the back side of this. Alright, now that we've got the panel installed and secured, we're going to take our 24-inch connection to go from our distribution on the battery here to the 60 amp circuit breaker on the inlet side. And spin this off. Careful not to drop your hardware. Run this under. I'll just spin that down by hand and tighten it up in a second. Alright, now that we've got this tightened down, the other side we're going to leave off for the time being before we get started on the inside. We don't want to blow any fuses or damage anything, but we're going to connect the other end of the 24-inch lead to this connection here under the battery tray, and that'll be the last step to power up the whole system. All right, so we've got our low voltage disconnect. We've gone ahead and taken the two negative outputs. We've twisted them together into one side of a heat shrink butt connector. We've made an extension. We're going to run this to a good ground. We're going to use the factory ground here on the front of the truck that you use for jumping the truck if need be. To continue with the low voltage disconnect assembly, we're going to take the 12 volt in. We're going to connect it with the supplied add a fuse system, and on the gas models we're going to use the passenger heated seat, which is the 15 amp fuse here. You can reference the inside of your fuse box to figure out which one is yours, and ensure that you install the add a fuse the correct way. If the features don't work after you finished your installation, turn it the other direction. All right, we've finished the input wiring for the low voltage disconnect. We have our main fuse and relay box here for the S-Tec switch system. We have the main 12 volt source for the system. We have all of your switches. These would be 1 through 6 or 1 through 4 if you're on the 6 switch system. We have the signal wire, which we will be connecting to the 12 volt out of the low voltage disconnect. And then we also have a ground wire for the system, which we will be connecting to the chassis ground where we connected the low voltage disconnect to. And then lastly, we have the single switch, or single plug, excuse me, that runs into the truck itself and plugs into the switch system, which we will get to later. So on the 8 or the 10 switch systems for the Colorado, you're going to have a second relay and fuse box. We found a pretty good spot to mount this on top of the OEM fuse cover. Is pretty good. We're going to use 2 screws to attach through the top of the cover and seal with RTV so there's no water ingress. And this spot allows us to connect the 12 volt to the 60 amp breaker, our ground reaches, and we can run our extension cable along the inside and join up with our main harness and run through the firewall. All right, so we've gone ahead and we've secured the boxes. We've got our grounds hooked up. We've tightened all the bolts on the circuit breaker. So the next step is we're going to run the leads for the switch system for inside the truck through the firewall. You've got 2 options for this. We've chosen the less permanent option. If you look at the firewall, there's a big harness that runs through, and we're going to take a razor blade and make a slight slit in that and feed the wires through and seal it back up with RTV. The other option, should you choose, on the automatic vehicles, is you can drill a small hole and insert a grommet where the clutch pedal would typically go through. We can show you better where that is inside the truck. It'll be to the left of the steering column. All right, we've moved inside the truck. We're underneath the driver's side footwell area. You can see the steering column here, and the grommet that we referred to previously is up here. You can see the harness pass through. We've gone ahead and made a slit in it already. The wire you're seeing is for a radio, so ignore that. But we can run the wires through that slot and then run them behind the gas pedal and into the center console area where we will connect our main switch panel. The other option that we talked about was for the clutch location. If you have an automatic vehicle, these panels are actually pre-cut from the factory, so you just need to pull out these plugs, and behind there you will find a blank piece of firewall which you can drill through with a step bit and install a rubber grommet and feed your wires through there, and then similarly run them from here across and behind the center console. So we've gone ahead and pulled the harness from the 6 relay box and the harness from the 2 relay box. They're running through the grommet up top here. We're going to seal that up with some RTV in a moment, and then we're going to take our 2 harnesses and run them up around through the back of the center console, and we'll start the disassembly of the center console now. So we're in the interior now. Step 1 to installing the switch panels inside that control all of the functions is to remove the side pieces of the center console. We've gone ahead and done that. If you start at the front and work your way. You can see the locations of the clips. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So if you start at the front, slowly pull out the tabs and work your way back, you can remove the entire panel, and that is the same on both the passenger and the driver side. All right, so after we've removed the 2 side panels of the center console, we need to remove the panel that houses the heated seat functions, if you have heated seats. If not, it's the same panel. It's the one right below the hazard button. It's a little difficult to take off. Definitely recommend using some trim removal tools if you have them. One in each side does the trick. And once that's removed, we can continue with the installation process. So we've gotten the panel out of the truck now. This is the panel that's just below where the hazard light sits. This model in particular has the heated seats, so you only have the option for a 4-switch system here. And so we've got 2 options. You can go with a standard tactile illuminated switch or a push button engraved switch with backlighting. As we mentioned previously, these are available in a couple different configurations. So as you can see, this has a very nice fit, looks very OEM. The only thing that you will need to do for the 4-switch system is if you go on to the S-Tec website, there is a drill guide provided online in the installation area that shows you where you need to drill the back of the pocket here in the center to allow the harness to pass through and to install the hardware that secures the panel into the truck. So this one in particular is a STL file. I printed this out on my printer. So if you turn this panel around, it actually fits over very nicely. And it gives you a drill guide for the 2 holes, in addition to showing you the material you need to remove to allow the switches to sit flush and the harness to pass through. You can do that with a Dremel and clean up with a file, do it with a drill, however you feel appropriate. For our installation, we're going to continue with the 8 and 10 switch option, so we're not going to be doing any drilling on this panel. All right, so we're back in the vehicle. We discussed the 4-switch installation that mounts in the panel that goes here, that controls the heated seats. The next one we're going to talk about is the 6-switch installation, which we have here. Mounts in the lower portion of the cubby as shown in front of the cup holders. Once again, you can go onto the S-Tec website, and there's a printout template that shows you where you need to drill to allow for the installation of this panel using the provided hardware into the inserts. All right, we're going to continue with the installation of the 8 and 10 switch system. So we're back in the truck now, and we've printed out our template that you can find on the S-Tec website for drilling the 2 mounting holes on each side of the center console that mount our panel. So we've gone ahead and cut this out. There's some arrows that you align to the edge. I'm using masking tape to hold this in place. We're going to drill our 2 holes that are marked out with the 5/32 drill bit, and then we're going to mirror this to the driver's side, line up our edges again, and drill the next 2 holes. All right, so we finished drilling. We'll get the light and show you a little better here. We've got 1 hole drill here and the other hole drilled down here. As you can see, we've taken our template. We've got the holes drilled out now. We're going to mirror this onto the driver's side and use the holes in the paper to align the holes on the driver's side. All right, we finished our 4 holes to mount the panel. We're going to need to remove the plastic here that houses the switch heaters for the heated seats, and then remove this panel in the back of the cubby, which houses the USB, the headphone jack, and the cigarette lighter. We're going to remove these and install them into the new one. So take your trim removal tools or something of equivalent to pop this off. There we go. Just kind of work your way around. All right, we've removed and disconnected the switches for the heated seats. We're going to remove this panel here now that has the cigarette lighter and the USB and the headphone jack. So So they're up at the top here. They're a little hard to see, tucked up behind some of the wiring. There are two 7mm hex bolts. We're going to remove those and pull this panel out. Alright, so once you remove the two 7mm hex bolts at the top, panel just kind of pulls forward a little bit, and we can disconnect these two electrical connections, and then we'll take this over to the bench and show you how to remove the two OEM pieces that we're going to move into the new S-Tec switch panel. Alright, we're back on the workbench. We've got the OEM panel out of the truck. We have our new S-Tec switch panel here. We've gone ahead and removed the OEM components that we're going to reuse. The headphone jack and USB is the easiest to remove. You can squeeze these real easily with your fingers. There's a release on the top and the bottom. And there's a keying feature in the OEM panel that we're going to line up with the new S-Tec panel over here, right here. So you just slide this in, it pops in real nice. For the 12 volt, we found it a little easier to remove it in two steps. Step one, you can use this tab here and this tab here to remove the internal section with the plug on the back. Once you remove this, you can squeeze the two sides that hold the cover in place and snap that out of the OEM panel. Installation, we're going to do the same. We're going to install this. There's a keying feature at the top that lines up with the new S-Tec panel. Alright, and we're going to snap in the bezel first. And then we're going to take the 12 volt cigarette lighter. There's a single keying feature on this side here, and two features here that line up with features in the bezel. So the two go towards the passenger side, and that slides in, and you can hear it pop, and then we're good to go. We can start with the installation of the S-Tec panel. Alright, we're back in the truck. We're routing our wires. So as you remember, we have our two leads coming through the firewall, through the grommet above the steering column. We're going behind the switches for the gas pedal, and then we're feeding them up through this portion of the center console, and that allows us to feed up through this left side of the center console. And we're going to make our connections, install the panel, and then we'll tidy up the harness. Alright, we're back in the engine bay. We have finished up the interior installation of the S-Tec switch system. So we've gone ahead and pulled the excess wire back through the grommet in the firewall. We've tied that up to a bracket right behind the fuse box. I didn't want to tie the extra wire up underneath the dash and have it get in contact with the brake or the gas pedal, so we thought this was a good, safe option. So with that done, we can connect the last few things and test the system out. So make sure all of your grounds are connected to a good chassis ground. We've used the ground on the core support here, the factory ground location for all of our grounds. We have connected the main 12 volt of the system to the positive side of the battery directly. We have reconnected the battery ground that we disconnected at the beginning. With all of that done, you can close the circuit breaker and power the system on. So if we go inside the truck, you'll see that we have power. So with the system off, the power button is illuminated so you can see it. Turning that on gets you access to the panel. This configuration has the lockout controlling the first two switches, and this is something that can be changed if you wanted to place an order for one of these systems. So let's see, we have good feedback from all of the switches here. And let's see, the inverter button is wired up and working correctly as well, showing the battery voltage currently. So there you are. That is the full installation of the S-Tec switch system for the second generation Colorado and Canyon. If you're interested in purchasing this system or another system for the Colorado and Canyon or many of the other vehicles, or have any questions, please feel free to visit the S-Tec website. Hope you found this video helpful with your installation and hope you enjoy your S-Tec product.